As you can see from the AFX search website on my screen behind me, we have come to the investigative portion of our videos for today. And as a transition, we're going to start talking about title forensics. So we're transitioning from real estate and title searches to investigations. Of course, this is Dave at AFX Search. We're licensed investigators in Palm Beach, Florida. So title forensics is a process of taking a title search, which is not quite an investigation, it's an advanced form of document research, and doing something with it that is a more investigative activity. First thing is, property records don't lie. They are hard copy documented items which have no ambiguity. It is literally documented hard copy records. It's different than data. Data is actually data. It's not paper documents. A piece of paper such as a deed might have 5 pieces of data on it: name, address, grantor, grantee, but that is not as good as taking that whole document and reading it through front to back. There might be 2 or 3 pages on a deed. There might be 2 or 3 or more pages on a mortgage. That stuff is gold when it comes to an investigation. First, you start with the terms and conditions. What were the conditions of sale? Was there any money being lent by the seller? Were there other people's interest taken into account? Were there any side deals on that property? Was there a mortgage broker? Was there a real estate broker? Were there any kind of requirements to live in a property? First thing you start with is terms and conditions. How long is a mortgage good for? Next thing you look at is, in the margins of that document, are there any notes? When that document was being prepared by an attorney or title company, there may be little notes put in the corner. There may be page numbers. There may be contact phone numbers. Very frequently, we find marginal notes that can help an investigation. There's also what's called a send to block. You take an original deed. It's signed by the buyer and seller. The title company sends it down to the land records office to be recorded. Once it's recorded, they send back an original to whoever it says in the send to block. It might go to the buyer, it might go to an attorney, it might go to a title company. In any event, that's good information. If the buyer has the deed sent to an attorney, well, that attorney might have been who prepared the closing. It also might be that buyer's attorney. And it might be information about, well, what other legal cases is that buyer involved with? If you look up that attorney, find out what cases they did in the different counties around that property, you may find that that buyer or that subject was involved with other cases, as a plaintiff, as a defendant, as a criminal defendant, maybe as a witness. So you can look at that attorney and see what relationship do they have with that buyer. The second thing is, if it was a title company, did that title company prepare any other closings for these parties? Are there other properties owned, bought, or sold? Who is it prepared by? Who is the documents drawn up by and for? The next thing we're going to look at is the notary and the witnesses to that document. What people witness the signature? Look, when you do a deed or mortgage, you sign it as a grantor or grantee. You have to have witnesses to your signature to make that document valid to be recorded. Those witnesses don't have to be anybody special. Whoever's in the room, that's it. So one of them has to be a notary. That's a licensed activity. The other 2 can just be anybody who's hanging around. In most cases, it's somebody who came with the subject, right? So if you look at, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll take 25 documents that subject has signed over the last 10 or 15 years. Pull them all. Find out what documents they signed in history. Pull them all, put them all together. Look at all the witnesses throughout that period of time. If we find a similar name appearing on multiple documents, that's probably not just somebody who worked at the title company. That's probably somebody who's a colleague, associate. Sometimes we find boyfriends and girlfriends that were witnesses to that document, business partners. That's somebody you might want to talk to depending on the level of the investigation. The next thing we'll do is, every document that a person signed, we look at adjacent documents to it. Remember, paper, deed, property records are filed chronologically. If I have a deed to a property and I record it, the next deed that goes after it may not have to do with that property. It's just whoever brings in the next piece of paper to the county clerk. But in most cases, documents are brought in packages from an attorney or from a title company. So if one person did multiple transactions, they're going to be together. You're not going to find that in the name index. You may find that the next document, the next transaction, was from the same title company, maybe having to do with that subject. Even if it didn't, that's somebody who might have been in that land records office on the same day. They might have information about who was your subject hanging around with, who did they come to the office with, what kind of car were they driving. Good information from adjacent documents. Also look at what type of form it's on. If a deed is on a professional attorney's title agency form, that's one thing. What if it's on a standard form, generic form from Office Depot? That might tell you something about the nature of that transaction. It might have been thrown together, especially if it's a quitclaim deed. So we're going to look at the attorney to see what cases there are. We're going to look at witnesses to see what the signatures are like. We're going to look at locations. The notary is going to have to put on their notary stamp where the document was signed, at least what county it's in, so you know where that transaction took place. Maybe it's in a different place where that person was supposed to be. And in notaries, we may also look at, was the notary stamp valid when it was signed? Here's the last thing. If we find that a document was signed at a certain location, that may be another area, if it's far away from where this subject lives, to look for criminal records, to look for residences, or even other associates. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are hundreds of ways that title documents can be used forensically in an investigative case. It's valuable information. A 15-page mortgage document is gold for an investigator. There's so many things you can look at that and find out about a subject. Taken all together, all the documents a person signed, all the properties they bought and sold, even if they don't own them anymore, there's just a gold mine of information that a really good investigator can use to dig up just in land records, title forensics. Not counting any other sources of information. Land records, just one source by itself, ton of information. Make sure that if you're an investigator, you're using it, or if you're a client, ask your investigator to make sure that they are using it to help your case.